I'm here with Mr. Carpenter. He is an eighth grade science teacher, and we met before this lesson that I observed and talked about how we're going to align the standards to what was being taught and the strategies we were going to use. And I asked him to bring student-friendly outcomes in student terms, and he's going to explain the standard a little bit that we covered.
Yeah, so for this lesson, we looked at Standard 11 for the Alabama Course of Study objectives, and we were going to use models to demonstrate each of Newton's laws of motion and explain the effects of net forces on objects. We also looked at and we wanted to use mathematical representations to explain how the sum of external forces on an object and the object's mass affect its acceleration. So anytime you talk about these certain topics, one thing that I like to start off with and that we did was introduce academic vocabulary. And the way that we did that was through a KWL. We wanted to see what the students know, what they want to know, and then we would come back at the end and learn, see what they learned. And that kind of gives me a way to see what terms they understand from the get-go, whether that be forces, motions, acceleration, speed, time, and it was a very good way to formatively assess from the beginning kind of where students are, and that's the way that the lesson started out, and I believe that part went
Yeah, I
went
think
really
your
well.
KWL chart allowed you to go ahead and be able to differentiate
Yes.
your kids and how they would be able to, how much help they would
Yes,
need to get
it was
through.
interesting hearing those conversations between students, because they may not necessarily be able to give you the technical definition of force right away, but they were able to understand what forces are right off the get-go. They were able to talk about, well, it's kind of how strong something is, and then we kind of dug a little bit deeper into that, and ended up determining that a push or a pull is a great way to describe force.
Yeah. And I liked how you integrated the technology with the roller coaster
Yes.
demo. Was that a FET lab?
Absolutely. So we started out with a FET simulation, and students were able to change variables such as mass and speed and the angles in which the roller coaster was traveling. And it was a great way to introduce how variables are affected, and that related back to the standard, because when we changed an object's mass and we kept force the same, the students noticed that the force actually went down, or that the acceleration or the speed went down.
And that's what we call a hook, the
Yes,
engagement
absolutely.
for the lesson. So then it led into the activity for the day, which was the lab you did. And I think it did a great job of relating real world.
Yes.
Because they were using body weight. Explain your lab a little
Yeah.
bit.
Absolutely. So when we talk about Newton's second law of motion, a great way to do that is calculating speed. So we started out the lesson understanding what speed and velocity was, and we were able to calculate that through the walk, jog, run lab. And what we did is students walked heel to toe first, and then walked normally, and then ran. So what we were doing with a variable we affected was speed, and at the end of the day, we affected acceleration, and we were determining, we were able to collect the data. One individual student from each group was the test subject, and so we were able to calculate that student's weight in kilograms. Obviously, we made sure that students were comfortable sharing that
Yeah.
information.
They had fun
And
with this.
so, yes, and groups that weren't, we decided to give them a baseline mass. We
Yeah.
just didn't, we gave them a mass of,
Yeah.
we just
Still
gave
had
them
to
a
time and
mass.
record data.
Yes,
Everybody was doing
absolutely.
the same thing.
So it was really, really cool, and I thought the students did a really good job of relating to how does mass and how does speed affect acceleration?
We had talked about one of my goals for the school is to increase reading and math proficiency. So both were related here in this lesson today, because one, the academic vocabulary, you enforce that, and then two, we're seeing those computational skills with this lab, which you assess through the lab report.
Yes.
And you brought your lab reports.
Yes.
I see you've already looked over them.
Yes, it was really, really good, as far as students were able to master the standard at around an 85% rate. They were able to use mathematical representations to explain how the sum of external forces on an object affect the object's mass. And the way that we did that, I believe, 95% of all students were able to determine Newton's laws of motions and the effects of net force on objects. So that was great. We obviously, the 5% were working, and they're
I
working
do think
on
you
that.
did a good job
Yes.
as you were monitoring by walking around the groups with the math.
Yes.
You were able to differentiate because some of them needed more help with the formulas,
Yes.
and some of them were able to rearrange them themselves.
One of the great things about this lesson, it's easy to differentiate. You know,
Yeah.
there you can provide units. You can also make students that are excelling at a higher level, you can make them show their units. So you can also talk about, and one of the things that we were able to get through in our discussion after the math is because, you implement reading and comprehension through math at the same time, is you can look at the numbers and say, oh, mass is inversely proportional to acceleration and inversely proportional to force. And then,
I think you're very knowledgeable on your content, as it's always evident, but you also do a great job at being present in the lessons. So you're not
Yes.
just sitting at your desk, you're walking around, so you are able
that's
to.
the most important part.
Yeah.
You have to, in order to make your lesson successful, you have to engage your students first, because motivation and engagement go hand in hand. So if your students are not engaged, they're not going to be
Yeah,
motivated
and you're also
to do the
able
work.
to differentiate and help them and fill the gaps as you go along. With your data, I don't think that you need to revisit this next lesson. You can move on to
Yes.
Newton's Law number 3. But I encourage you to review the data every
Yes.
time and make sure, because it's okay to go back and revisit something and you can get your small groups and get the ones that struggled and help them, and then give the ones who excelled something more advanced
Absolutely.
in a day, and it's totally okay to use your class time for that.
Yes.
But I appreciate you sitting down with me today, and I look forward to doing it again.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.